Hi everyone, this is Naz from Info.Tech.Journal. We're going to continue on our video series, our video journey in the combination of Java and PowerShell. This particular video section, we're still discussing on PowerShell basics so we can develop a strong foundation to later develop our PowerShell scripts to be included with our Java project. From the previous video, we've already discussed a few things. Namely, we've discussed PowerShell console, some Git help features, but we have not specifically talked about a few components that we'll be discussing in this video. We've discussed about aliases, and we've also discussed briefly about finding commands. In this particular video, we'll be adding to it. So in terms of Git help, we'll be using the dash question mark, help, as well as looking deeper into specifically the syntax options available to us when we use get help. This is very powerful in terms of us understanding how parameters, flags, or switches, or you can name them anything, but in usual terms for PowerShell, we call them parameters, how these parameter combinations are made available to the commandlet and the combination of these parameters that are allowed between the sequence of parameters for specific commandlet. So we will look at that later as well. And we're also going to be looking deeper into finding commands. Specifically, we're going to use get command with in conjunction with some wildcards, or like the star. So we're going to use that to figure out if let's say we're reading on something and we remember that, oh, there is a command in PowerShell that starts with C, or there is a command in PowerShell that has the word net in it. So we'll use those wildcards to help us filter to the list of commandlets. We're also going to look at nouns and verbs specifically for PowerShell commandlets. So without further ado, let's continue on. Let's get started with our get help. As you all know, we already know how to get help. So with get help, you have to get help, right? And then get service. Let's just start there for today. So get help, get service. So if you just execute get help, get service, right, you get a simple help page for namely get service, the command get service. If you were interested in getting a full detail of get service for help page, you can actually just put the dash full parameter to get a full page. To get an online version of it, you can just say get help, get service online. Or you can also get service detailed, or namely like we discussed previously, we can actually just zone in or zoom in into just the examples for that particular command. This is not the only way to get help. So let's say you want to get service, and then you just want to get help. You can also say dash question mark. With this, you get the same help page as you would when you use get help. Another way to do this, let's say if the help page is a bit too long and you just keep on scrolling, and you want to use, if you are Unix or Linux users, you probably familiar with pipe more, but here you can also do that, but simply just saying help without get help, just help, and then just get service. If you notice here, there's a slight difference at the bottom. There's actually the more word at the bottom and a blinking cursor. So you know here there's more to this page. Also, if you press enter here, it gives you a line at a time. If you press space, it'll give you one whole page. So just remember, enter one line at a time, space bar gives you the whole page. If you want to just exit, you can just Control C or Q would do as well. So that's just an addition to what we discussed in the previous video on get help. So let's look through get help and focus on the particular syntax. We actually have it here as in the syntax. Let's try to actually discover what does all these square bracket means and why do we have 3 separate syntax options. So let's go there. Let's go to the whiteboard to do that. So I have it on the whiteboard. So let's go here. As you probably have noticed at this moment, that we actually have 3 options here to do the syntax. Right? Hopefully you can see it. Let's zoom out a bit. Okay. So with the syntax, you have 3 options. Let me make it a bit smaller so you can see it better. Hopefully you can see that. So with this options, you have 3 name options. So there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. So you can see those 3 syntax options are the combinations of parameters. When I say parameters, these are parameters. That means, or some people call them flags, to further refine your desired output or the desired outcome from your command or your PowerShell command. So each tree gives you an option of combination for which parameters can be put in the sequence to get the desired effect. So we'll talk about it a bit more later with a more concrete example. With get service, it kind of looks similar, but we'll talk about how these parameters sequencing, how the order of them is different for different commands. So you have 3 options here. And then you see there's a lot of square brackets. What I mean by square brackets, these are square brackets. You can see here, this is a square bracket 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 here, right? These square brackets means that the parameter is optional. If you notice that all of them have square brackets, that means, simply put, that you can actually run or execute get service without any parameters. That's what it means. So the square bracket means that that particular parameter is optional. So let's look at it in PowerShell. So if you look at PowerShell here, right? Let's just if you just say get service without any of those additional parameters, it will execute. So you know that those things in the square brackets, those commands, those parameters are optional. So now you have understand that those square brackets are optional to that particular command. So let's dive a little bit deeper. If you look further, you also see that this particular parameter has a square bracket in front of it. So this means that this particular parameter, the name parameter, is optional. What do I mean by optional? That for get service to execute and for you to pass a particular name or string, this parameter, name parameter, is optional. Okay, let's just look at PowerShell. Hopefully you can understand it better. So in PowerShell, I can run the get service with the parameter dash name. Okay, let's just pick WMI. And it will get me this service with anything in front or anything in back with WMI in the middle. So that you have WMI here. This will also run or execute if you simply say get service without the dash name parameter and simply saying WMI. That is what it means to have those square brackets in front of that particular parameter. So let's continue along and look at the other parameters as well. But then with that, I'm just going to add just a little bit but specifically for the name parameter. If you were to look at further, the name parameter is actually a positional parameter. What do I mean by positional parameters? Let's go into get service, or get help, get service. Get help, get service, and this time we're looking at a full help. Okay, it'll take a while to load just a bit. And let's look at the parameter listing. So these are examples. Okay, these are the parameter listing. So let's look at the heading. So you see here parameters. You notice here there's a position question mark. That means this is the sequence of parameters or the number or order that the parameters should fall on. If it's question mark name, that means if the name is present, it just needs to come after the name. For example, this particular one, you have the position 0. That means it needs to start in the beginning for it to work, for it to know that you're actually executing or actually inputting a string that is specifically for the name parameter. If you have a value of 1, you might be running on a previous PowerShell version that's not PowerShell version 5.1, or maybe an older version. So how do you check your version again? Simply just question mark host. And you see that I'm running 5.1 at the current moment. So in some instance, you might see that as position 1. Where is it again? Let's go see. And the position, rather than being 0. Okay, let's clear this. Now if you understand some of the parameters and what those brackets or square brackets mean. Okay, let's clear the screen a bit. Now, if you notice, we have those square brackets in front of the parameters themselves, and also the square brackets encasing the name of the parameter. But you also see these square brackets. Basically, with name and the system string, you know that name takes into a string for it to perform its intended action. And that particular string takes in is allowed to take multiple values, seemingly enabled by that square brackets enclosed next to the system string variable type. Okay, just to show this to you again, let's go to PowerShell. Okay, now we're in PowerShell. So if you say get service and you say WMI, right? That's just one. If you just say get service, it will show you the list of the whole full services, right? Let's just pick another service here. Let's just pick VDS for virtual disk. So if you just look at 2 services, you can just say get service with the WMI and VDS separated by a comma. So here you can see there's 2. Again, let's say you wanted to display WMI and any services that starts with C. So C star or wildcard. So it'll show you a list of service that starts with C and WMI. So that particular square brackets for the string that's taken in by the name parameter allows you to have multiple values. Here I'm showing you 2. It doesn't mean 2. You can also make it 3 if you want. Let's say something that has the word app. So you can see here app. So I'm not sure if there's going to be any other else. So I'm not sure if it's the front or the back. I just want apps in the middle. So you see here now the value or the output is WMI. Anything that starts with a C. Also, any services that has app in the name of the service. So app. Okay. This one is specifically in the middle. Okay. So we'll have a quick explanation on the use of wildcards in a little bit, but let's just go through the syntax a bit more, and then we'll move forward. Let's go back to the whiteboard. So with the whiteboard, we've already covered all the square brackets, all the string variables. Now the next thing is let's cover the sequence of operations or the sequence of inputting parameters. Okay, the sequence of inputting parameters. With this particular example, you can't really see it as much, but then if you notice, for this particular example and this particular example, you notice that this one, it has computer name, dependent service, exclude as well, include as well, required service, but this one does not have display name string. You notice? Display name string. So that means if you have display name string as a parameter, these are the other parameter combinations that is accepted or allowed, or combinations of parameters that will produce results. For this one, it's quite difficult to see because it's actually quite similar between all three. So let's go to an example of another commandlet that you can actually see a bit better. So let's go to a commandlet that we can use. So let's go back to PowerShell. So in PowerShell, let's use the commandlet get event logs. Okay, so let's see, get help, get event logs, and event logs, and let's see full description. Okay, or better yet, let's open show window. Okay, now here you can see probably a bit too small for you, so let's make the font a bit bigger, and let's go to syntax. Okay, here you can actually see it a bit clearer. With event logs, there's a stark difference, or like there's a big difference between the first syntax option they give you and the second syntax option they give you. As you can see, this one has a lot more parameter options available as compared to when you start your get event logs with as string. So let's just go to a quick example. Let's go to log name and just see all the logs available to us. So I'm gonna keep it here. I'm gonna make this a bit smaller so you can see this as well. Okay, now let's say get event logs, and then I want to have log name, and let's just show everything. So this is get event logs, log names, and these are the list of all the logs available. Correct? And then let's say if you look at here, log name, and then you can actually combine log name with newest, and then takes a system int32. Basically, it means it takes an integer. So let's just continue, and let's say newest, and let's just say top 2. Log name, event newest, and it shows you that all this have 2 of the current events, 2 current new events. Okay, and it allows you to combine these two parameters together. If you look at event logs and add string does not have the option of using the parameter newest. So let's see. Okay, get event logs, and we say add string, and then you can see here now event logs produces add string. Don't worry if you don't know, if you're not sure about what the command does. I'm just showing you what happens if we actually combine a parameter set that is not part of the syntax combination. So let's combine as string with newest. As string with newest. And let's just say newest too. You see here, it actually says invalid argument. Depending on which commandlets you use, combinations of commandlets, sometimes it will produce an event error message like you see here, or sometimes it might produce a blank. So that also depends on your PowerShell version and which commandlets you use. So don't be worried that sometimes you think you have the parameter sets correct for that particular commandlet. So it's best to, when in doubt, look at the syntax combination for parameters allowed, or a parameters combination that produces the results you need. So from here you can see with log name you have newest entry after all this is available if you started with log name, or you can use instant ID in combination with newest, or log name with index after with message, but you can't use instance ID in conjunction with as string, or a combination of as string and you want to use after. Now that's what it means to have this particular portion of help. It gives you a rough idea, a good idea, okay, on the types of parameters or flags or switch that is available for that commandlet to be combined. So it took me a while to actually understood this as well when I was starting out, and it always produces a blank or some weird errors that I didn't really understand. So good to take note that when you get help, you go to the syntax portion and just look at the possible combination of parameters that you can use. Okay, following along, hopefully that was clear. Following along, let's go to another thing that I just want to highlight really quick. So when I was starting out, if you were taking notes, or if you were to converse or discuss commandlets or PowerShell commands with an individual, the proper syntax would be, people would always say get command, or people would always say get service name, get service with dependent service. Okay. But you have to remember, when people are using those words directly, that there's usually an implied dash that you have to remember. So what do I mean by an implied dash? Let's go back to our whiteboard. With our whiteboard, okay, you notice here that when I say get service, right, I do not say get service with a dash. I don't say get service get dash service. So when I was starting out, when I was discussing with people, I would always take note of the particular commandlets and always forget to put a dash in it. So a particular rule of thumb for Windows, especially with commands, just a quick structure, you would always get the first part being a verb. Okay, the first part being a verb. What is a verb? A verb is like the word get, set. Okay. Test is also a verb. You test. That's a verb. So that's usually the first part of the command. The second part of the command usually is a noun, a descriptor. an item, okay, that you want to perform an action on. Okay, you can't really see it, so let's just clear this out. So I'm gonna make it a bit smaller. My handwriting does get a bit big after a while. So there's a verb with a dash and a noun. So you can see with get service, get is the verb dash service is the noun. Right? So there's always a convention with a dash. Okay, why is it helpful? Like for later when we actually go into get command, with get command there's also a parameter that you can filter for nouns and verbs. So it's good to know the basic command structure for commandlets. So you have a verb and you have a noun. Also with parameters, if you notice, all the parameters also have a dash. So with the parameters like get service, get dash, depend. So the front part is always a dash. So just make sure that you remember that the front part of your parameter has a dash. Now that's just some quick tips. So when you're taking notes or you're listening to a conversation and you think, oh, that's interesting, and you want to try it out in your home safe environment. Hopefully you don't test it out directly on a working environment. So some commandlets can be quite disruptive. So just a point of advice, have a VM ready to test it out or have it on your personal PC to just test it out. So now we understand the basic structure. We've gone through the get help, the basic syntax, and how the commandlet is formed by a verb and a noun. So continue on for this particular video. So we're gonna go to our last particular tip to help you develop your PowerShell skills or help you get started and give you a better idea so that when we actually go to our final commandlet that we're gonna use in our Java PowerShell project, that you can actually better understand it, or if you don't really understand it clearly you can go to help or find a similar command that you can use to figure out how it works. So let's go to our last portion, which is basically we're gonna use the get commandlet. So what is get command and how would it help you to learn more about PowerShell? Yeah, so let's go to our PowerShell environment. So we're back in PowerShell. So let's just clear this real quick. So clear, hopefully you remember, you can actually type CLS, or let's say if you're not sure what is the actual commandlet, you can just say get alias and CLS. And here you can see get alias CLS is actually clear host. So let's just use the proper term, clear host. So now the host is clear. So we're gonna minimize, close that as well. So now we're gonna continue with get command. So if you say get command, it'll show you a list of commands, and there's a lot of commands for PowerShell. The basic structure of a command is you have a command type. If you can see here, there's aliases, there's functions. Functions are built-in features in PowerShell that takes in various methods that produces certain results. For this particular video series, we're not gonna actually delve into creating our own specific function, but it is possible because again, PowerShell, if you have not noticed, is actually an object-oriented programming language or scripting language as well. So depending on which book or which website you read on the definition of PowerShell. So yeah, you see functions as well, and we can scroll a bit further down. You can see these are the commandlets themselves. That's what we've been working on. Okay, so let's say you're just learning PowerShell and you're probably interested in a command. And then the command is specifically for networks. So let's just say you say get command. And before that, let's just go get help for get command. Get help, get command. A similar page appears. So get command gets all the commands, and here you can see again, you see the square brackets, and for name, that means name is an optional parameter for you if you choose to type it or if you don't choose to type it. But just a word of advice, if you're giving your script to somebody, it's best to include all the parameters fully listed, because it doesn't help you or help the other person trying to figure out which parameters that you are actually specifying, especially if there's a few numbered parameters or optional parameters that doesn't need to be specified for the syntax to work. So it just helps them to reduce the amount of guesswork involved in trying to learn that particular syntax. So get command name and string. It gives you a particular list of string. And here you can see you can actually filter it for command type. So alias, function, filters, commandlets, and external scripts, application, and so forth. We're particularly interested in command type for commandlets, and we're also going to look at nouns and verbs. So if you notice here, we have noun and we also have verb. So we'll look at that a little bit in this particular video as well. So let's continue along. We know that you can use name, and name also allows for, let's go full to see the parameter list. Okay, let's look at a parameter list, output input, and this is the parameter list. So name, as you can see, name also is the same when you use get service. It specifies an array of names, and it also allows for wildcards. So let's discuss wildcards in a bit as well. So let's say get command. Okay, it allows for wildcards for names. So I'm going to say name. Let's say you wanted something, a command that starts with C. So you would say C and wildcard. So this means that anything starts with a C and the backend, I don't particularly specify or don't particularly remember for this particular one. So you just enter, and it'll produce anything that starts with a C in front of it. So let's say you are interested in something, or you remember a command. The command ends with a C, perhaps. So you can say star. So say it begins with anything and ends with a C. Let's see. So you now have all the commands that ends with a C. So let's say again that you remember that the command had net, for example, in the middle. So you can say anything in front with the word net and anything in the back. So it gives you a list of commands that is possible in PowerShell. So what do we see just now? That we can actually filter it for commandlets. So it's service type. Well, not service type, but let's just see what the command is again. So remember that you can actually do --, command type, and we're going to look at commandlets. So let's use in conjunction with what we did just now. So we just want to focus this on commandlets. So we're going to say command type and commandlet. And it will give us 3 options specifically with the word net in between or anywhere in the command of the name, and specifically for commandlets. Right? So this is the way you can just mix and match the combination to figure out which commands that you've heard before or you're interested in. Let's say we want to find a command that has VM in it. So we have VMs. So mostly it's functions. This is the sources. Maybe this one is for VM directory storage. This is for network adapter. This is actually an application, so it's MSC. And these are the functions with get and set and remove. So let's just dial down a bit more. So let's say you want to get this VM, right? And you want to get the verb. Let's say the verb get. Okay, here it won't work. Why doesn't it work? Oh no, it doesn't work. If you look at the full help again, this is where you might not know, or you might panic. It's like, oh, why does it not work? Again, we look at this syntax parameter. Look at this syntax parameter and this syntax parameter option. This is for get command. If you look at this one, you look at verb, right? In verb, the verb combination does not work with the name combination, because if you look at here, there is no option here for verb. Oh no. So if you're thinking of combining commands and sometimes it doesn't work, don't worry about it. Just look at the help again and make sure that you picked the right arguments, the right parameters, the right flags or switch to actually use it. So let's say, how do we get this to work then? Oh, simple enough. Get command, right? And then with the combination of verb and say get, so it'll give you all the get commands that are available, right? And then remember that I mentioned in the first part, this part is the verb and this part is the noun. So if you want to achieve what we wanted to do previously with trying to filter out the noun for VM, okay, I already said it, this is the noun for VM, so we actually put that as a noun. So we know here that there's a VM. Let's see, there's a VM. Okay, let's just pick this one. This one has add, and in the noun portion has VM. So let's go back and let's say we say add. See, there's a lot of adds. So now we're gonna combine it with noun. And the noun portion, we're gonna have a wildcard VM wildcard. And you can see here we have add VM in the beginning portion of the noun, and also add VM switch. So you can actually use it with the name combination. So let's just show history here. I'm going to show you history. If you don't know what history is, you basically just type history, and I'll just show you the history of commands that you've typed before. So for example, when we use this one, name net, that's in the name. It doesn't, for name, it doesn't matter if it's a noun or verb, as long as it is in the name portion of the commandlet. And the command type is commandlet. For this one, we were trying to combine VM with get verb, the verb get. But this is an, if you notice here, there was an error. The error mentioned, if we can bring it back, maybe it's just a bit too far. Yeah, it's a bit too far. Okay. The error was basically saying it's invalid. Here it is, invalid argument, because if you look at the help portion, that the two sequence of parameters were not allowed to be combined. So don't worry about it. We have another way to do it. So the next way to do it was, we know that we have the word verb. We chose the word verb add, and in this means that in the name portion, it looks at the verb or the start of the command. So for example, this is the start command. This is the verb component or the verb portion of the name. And this is the noun portion of the name. So then we say noun VM. So that's just a few ways for you to filter the get command. And hopefully with that particular example as well, it reinforces your understanding of when you say get help, get command full, and it gives you that option for syntax, that syntax actually gives you the combination of or possible combination to work in conjunction with other parameters. If you choose a parameter from the top portion and combine it with the bottom portion, you will get an invalid commandlet. Now you see the error. So don't panic when you start to learn this. So take your deep breath, try to remember, look at the get help, and make sure that the parameters that you selected are a good combination. Okay. That's it for this particular video on our road to actually develop a working syntax component or syntax, working syntax for our script that we're going to work with in our Java PowerShell. Thank you for viewing, and please follow along and see the next video for this particular video series.